A very happy new year to each and every one of you from all of us here at Cheeky Crypto and Cheeky Crypto Uncensored. So today is of course the new year and we want to have a look at Bitcoin. The probabilities for Bitcoin come January. We are now in January, so what can we expect? Are we in line for some extreme volatility, or are we expecting to coast through this month? Let's take a dive into the history of Bitcoin throughout its previous Januaries, all the way back to 2012, look at it all the way up to this current 2024's January, and have a look what we may be expecting to play out in this month. Yes guys, welcome back to Cheeky Crypto Uncensored. Let's dive into, a bit of a different video for today, especially for the Uncensored channel. We don't tend to cover off Bitcoin on here. That is mainly reserved for the main channel. But what you can see here is a very busy chart indeed. But we're looking at the history of Bitcoin here. So obviously the glaring thing you can see on the screen, minus the arrows, is of course the four halving periods we can see. 2012, 2016, 2020, and the upcoming halving 2024 around about April. So what we can see here is we are approaching the halving of 2024, and we can see the previous runs to the upside, where they fall and what's happened leading into them and leading up to them. But we're not going to look at the halvings today. I know that's kind of like the pressing point. Everybody wants to talk about halvings. You guys should know by now at this point, the effect halving has on the Bitcoin market doesn't really represent what it used to. It used to have a great effect. Nowadays, not so much. But what we are looking at is the previous Januaries themselves for Bitcoin, what they have done and how they have affected the markets. So when we look all the way back here to 2012, we've seen a very red January for Bitcoin, a 48.5% move to the downside. Now granted, this was around about $7 down to $4 for Bitcoin. What a phenomenal number that one was. So in reality, we don't really necessarily want to be looking at that one. And I think the same applies for 2013, a 61% move to the move to the upside, a very bullish move for Bitcoin's price, around about $13, moving up to $21. Now this is insane talking about these kind of numbers for Bitcoin. And then we can look, further ahead to 2014, where we do see this 27% move to the downside, roughly $900, seeing the price drop down to around $724. Then move on to 2015, 103% move to the upside, but this was preceded by a 50% move to the downside. 2016, we've seen a 24% move to the downside. Then we've seen a bit more volatility here, 2017, a 34% move to the downside, which was then followed by a 38% move to the upside. Move on to, the breakdown we did see in the markets here in 2018, a 55% collapse in Bitcoin's price, which was then matched up by a 19% move to the downside in 2019. Then, of course, we led into this push to the upside before the COVID crash. 2020, a 39% move to the upside. Yes, we did see the COVID crash and a 72% pullback in markets, which was incredibly unfortunate, or fortunate, however you want to look at that one. Then we move on to 2021. We've seen a fantastic 51% move to the upside in the January for BTC. Move on to 2022, in an extremely volatile January indeed. 30% move to the downside, followed by a 29.5% move up. Then the most recent January 2023, 46.56% move to the upside. So what we can see overall is a very much fluctuating January market for the price action of BTC. And we cannot really be decisive to say January is notoriously a green month or it is notoriously a red month. It is extremely volatile. When we do look back at the charts here, I do think the best way to look at this is probably from around about 2014, where we did start to see some proper growth into Bitcoin. So we can see red January, mixed January, red January, mixed January, followed by two red Januaries, followed by two green Januaries, mixed January, green January. So what is leading next? We can't really see a trend. There's no really pattern, and I don't think it's correct to put a pattern onto these. But what we can look at is the actual percentages themselves. Work out what the average percentages are, if it's a positive or if the average is a negative for the Januaries, and be a bit predictive or a bit presumptuous of the January we're going to see this year, bit of fun for today, guys. Nothing overly serious. We'll just have a look at the previous, have a look at the future, and have a look at what may happen this January. So what we will do now is we will come down to the daily Bitstamp chart here for Bitcoin. Now, let's just have a quick start off here in the origin of Bitcoin's Januaries. Well, we do see an extremely volatile extremely poor performing Bitcoin, a 48% move to the downside, seeing it move from $7 down to $4. Let me know in the comments down below if anybody watching this video managed to get into Bitcoin at $7 or $4. What an achievement that would have been. Now, of course, we can take it over to January 2013. We've seen that 64% push to the upside, which was, quite a different time indeed. When we really look into that one, guys, we're not going to do too much analysis on this. Moving from $13 to $15, 64% move. Even then, guys, if you managed to get in at this point, you're sitting in a very pretty position right now. Let us know if you did. But as we said in the intro, guys, we're kind of looking more to the more recent times for Bitcoin's price action, and where we do see a bit of volatility, a bit of money into the space for BTC. And then of course for that we can look at the period of 2014. We don't see extreme money into here, don't see extreme volatility, but we can appreciate that there is now more money in the market, in the crypto market, in the Bitcoin market, and we can see a 27% move to the downside from $995 to $725. Now what we can see is it's not just a straight line. We started off with a 23% move to the downside up until around about the 8th of January. This was then followed on by a 18.95% move to the upside. And then this was then followed on by another dump in the markets, 20.3% move to the downside. So yes, it's an extremely volatile January 2014, but overall the trend was to the downside, and it was a very red January. We then take over to 2015, where we can see once again an extremely red and green January, starting off with a 52.52% move to the downside, which was then followed up by a 103% move to the upside. So this is when we start to see extreme volatility, in my opinion, for Bitcoin. 2015 was essentially a month of two halves. The first 2 weeks up to the 14th of January was extremely red, 52% move to the downside. Then we see the 15th of January all the way here to the 26th, well, extremely green, 103% move to the upside. We then take over to 2016, where realistically we'll start this move here from the 8th of January. We've seen the high of $465 for Bitcoin and a 24% move to the downside here on the 16th of January, where we see that price down at $352. This was then pushed on with a 20% move to the upside to $423 Bitcoin. This is crazy looking at Bitcoin at these kind of numbers, but it's good for the analysis of today's video. Moving over to a little bit more recent, 2017. We've seen the start of January here, $1,140 Bitcoin, and we've seen an instant pullback down 35% to the 12th of January, seeing the price drop down to $751. This was then followed on by quite a good run to the upside here, 29.1% to the end of January, seeing Bitcoin close out here at $970. Then we look to the really the more bullish times, where we do see a fantastic amount of money in the Bitcoin market, all the way here in 2018. Well, it did start off green, opening at $12,801, and we see here on the 6th of January pushing up to $17,235, a 34.63% move to the upside. Extremely bullish start to January here. But that market then collapsed. We see here from the 6th of January all the way down to the 17th of January, 46.49% move to the downside, wiping out a lot of gains for the price action of Bitcoin, seeing the price drop down to $9,222. Then we can obviously start to accelerate much further into the future here, 2018, where once again we can see that January started off extremely bullish once again, moving up 13.29%. We did see the open here at $3,630, up to the 8th of January, pushing up to $4,112, where from here we've seen that price collapse 19.21% down to $3,322. Let's keep going. This is actually, it's turned out to be quite interesting overall. We move into this fantastic move, January 2020, where we did see the January open, January hit a low here of $6,854 before a fantastic 39% move to the upside here on the 30th of January, where we did see a high of $9,570 for Bitcoin. And then we come to the most volatile January, in my opinion here, for Bitcoin so far. We've seen this January hit a low here of $27,734, where we did see this 4th of January 2021. It then went on and done a fantastic 51.44% move to the 8th of January, where we've seen that $42,000 Bitcoin. From here, we then seen a collapse from the 8th of January to the 11th of January, a pullback of 27.95%, seeing the price come down to $30,261. This was instantly followed up by a 32% move to the upside, taking just 3 days, seeing that price go back up to $40,113, where we can see once again, 14th of January to the 22nd of January, another pullback of 28.2% to $28,800, and this was then moved on from the 22nd of January in a bit of a volatile move here to the 29th of January, a 34.1% move to the upside, seeing the price push back up to $38,620. So we can see 2021 so far has been the most volatile Bitcoin so far. And yeah, that was to be expected. 2021 was a much different time for Bitcoin, as we can see a very bullish market overall. 2022, this was obviously quite an interesting January for Bitcoin. We do see a heavy drop to start that month off. We can see the 1st of January, we've seen a high of $47,961, which was then instantly dropped down 31.3%, where we've seen that price drop down to $2,951. This did not take long. It did take most of January. I do apologise for that one. 24th of January, we've seen that price pull back 30%. But this was instantly led on by a nice 19.22% push to the upside, seeing February hit a high here, or close out a high here, 39,285. So a nice finish off to the January of 2022. Then, of course, we can come into the most recent January for Bitcoin. Well, this was a bit different, wasn't it? We've seen that price move from $16,496 with the high here in January of $23,954. So we have covered off a lot of numbers there. You can obviously go back, pause the video, and do what you need to do here to really understand what each January held, what kind of moves were held inside there. But once again, we can see there is no common trend here for what January should. There is no common trend here for what to expect in January, what January should hold. But what we can see is a lot of percentages in both directions. Very volatile Januaries, some very one direction Januaries. But overall, we can see that there is a mixture of volatility and flat moves either to the upside or to the downside for Bitcoin come Januaries. So what we can do here then is take a look at the overall moves that Januaries have seen. We can calculate the percentages and have a look overall. Is January a bullish or a bearish month for Bitcoin? So of course, we'll come back on to the charts now. We've drew this one up already. We've seen that 2012 was a negative month for January, a 48.5% move to the downside. 2013 was a positive month for a positive January for Bitcoin, 64.5% move to the upside. 2014, well, we've seen a 27% move to the downside. 2015, we can see the average here equaled out to be a positive 25.4% move for Bitcoin. 2016 was negative of 2%. 2017 was negative of 4%. 2018 was negative of 6%. 2019, negative of 2%. 2020 was very bullish, 39% move to the upside. Now 2021, that was the one we covered, it was extremely volatile. Well, we can see the average here for 2021 of a positive 12%. 2022, of course, was negative of 6%. Then we've seen last year that 2023 was a positive month for Bitcoin of 45%. So what we can see here, 7 negative January's 5 positives. But in my opinion, the positives heavily outweigh the negatives on the charts here. So we can see negative 48 but a positive 64, negative 27, positive 25. Then we've seen 4 consecutive negative Januaries, followed up by 2 extremely positives of 39 and 12%, another negative of 6%, but another positive of 45. So most recently, if we were to exclude the first 2 Januaries, which I do think is the best thing to do, then we can see that the negatives really have been outweighed by the positives. There is much more positivity to a January, in my opinion, seeing the likes of this 39%, the 12%, the 45%, the 25% moves to the upside, heavily outweighing the moves we tend to see on the negatives. Most recently, single-digit negative percentages, 6%, 2%, 6%, 4%, 2%. Then, of course, we do see that one, 2014, a negative 27. But should we be excluding these first ones, looking at the more volatile times, then in my opinion, January should be seen as more of a bullish move overall. That we do tend to see that Januaries are more positive than negative. We do tend to see these ones kind of outweighing the overall moves that we do see going on. So if we're going to have a bit of fun with this today, guys, let's talk about the possibilities for January, where we could see this one going. So if we take into account all of the averages we do see here from 2012 to 2023, and we get the average of the averages, well, that gives us a positive 7.49% for the overall average trend here for Bitcoin. Now, of course, there's absolutely no weight behind this one. This is purely for fun, for speculation. But should we see a 7.49% growth for Bitcoin come the end or at some point within January, well, that takes us to $45,770 on this USD Bitstamp chart for BTC. And if we were to simply ignore 2012, 2013 and 2014, something I don't like to do. I like to keep in track of all pieces of data of all history, but we can argue that, you know, the times back then were really not applicable to the chart for Bitcoin. The circulation was different, etc, etc. But should we exclude those 3 percentages there in the charts, and we actually start from 2015 to 2023, well, the average of the averages would be 8.42%, where we can see this one down here on the charts would see a growth of 8.42% in the month of January for Bitcoin, and we could potentially see $46,170. Now, for reference, guys, there's absolutely no strength, no power, no weight behind that possible movement. It's purely speculation. But what I wanted to do, the exercise for today's video, was to look at the previous months of January for Bitcoin, understand is there a common trend or a theory behind where Bitcoin could go in January. And overall, I do think in conclusion that we will expect January to be unbelievably volatile overall for Bitcoin. I think this January will be different to many other Januaries before. The news that we have potentially to come out this January surrounding the ETFs, I think, will create a lot of uncertainty in the markets. I do think there'll be a build-up in price before the ETF announcement, and I do think the ETF announcement will be an extreme sell the news event where we could see the markets collapse. So perhaps that 8.42% move is the move to the upside that we will get in January before we do see that market collapse. And I do think that that is my prediction for the ETF announcement. But I'd like to know your guys' thoughts when we do see the ETF announcement happen. Do you think this will bring out so much encouragement and a driving force behind the power of Bitcoin, driving it to all new highs? Or do you think it will be a sell news event and these markets will collapse off of the back of that announcement? But guys, I thought I'd just start off 2024 with a bit of a different video, having a look at the potentials for Bitcoin in 2024, specifically in January. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, smash up the like button, subscribe, tap on the bell, all the usual good stuff. Yeah, once again, guys, a very happy new year. I hope it's fantastic for each and every one of you. Yeah, I will catch you all in the next one.